Hi, my name is Jessica Berber, and today I'm going to be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm shooting this on a Monday, so I guess you could say this is Murder and Makeup Monday. So grab you a snack, sit down, and let's just talk about Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Leonel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, making him a Gemini. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His mother is named Joyce Dahmer and his dad, Leonel Dahmer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his dad's name right. His family life was pretty complicated, and you're not going to hear that from the parents because they want it to seem like Jeffrey Dahmer was completely fine. Like, I don't know how this happened. No. Joyce, the mother, she was such a complicated woman. She was really greedy. She was attention seeking. She was always arguing with Leonel Dahmer, the father. She was just a very aggressive woman. I mean, she had depression, and she even tried to commit suicide once. So that's that. Jeffrey Dahmer's father, he was never around. He was never around because he was in a university trying to get a degree in chemistry. When he was around, he was always arguing with Joyce. All they would do is constantly just argue. And you know what that led to? Jeffrey Dahmer just wanting attention, just wanting love. Like, he never really got that. His parents would say that Jeffrey was a happy child. But then once he turned 4, that all kind of went downhill ever since he had a type of surgery. I'm gonna put it up here what kind of surgery it was. And ever since, he was just a little odd. So what Jeffrey Dahmer would always like to do is collect dead animals. See, it first started with little critters, butterflies, and it started to be like a little bigger critters, and then it moved to roadkill.
Jeff, you would pick the carcasses up from the road and take them back into the woods.
Take them back in the woods, skin them sometimes, slit them all the way open, look at the organs, feel.
1966, they moved and they went to Ohio. They moved, and over there they had their second child that Jeffrey actually got to name, and he named him David. So around the same time that they moved, Jeff and his family were eating chicken at the dinner table, and Jeff asked what would happen to the bones of the chicken if it was placed in bleach solution. Jeffrey Dahmer's father was like really happy when he heard this from Jeff. He felt really sorry for Jeff because he didn't really have a social life, and he clearly was just awkward and weird. So he was like, this is a great time to bond with my son. So he showed Jeff how to safely preserve the bones. And that clearly stuck to Jeff throughout his life. Around that time, like after, that's when Jeffrey hit puberty and he figured out that he was gay. So good for you, Jeffrey, yay! A little more further, he was in high school, of course. And that's when his drinking problem began. And because of his drinking problem, he didn't do really good in school, and he would drink constantly, and he would hide it like under his like jacket and just would chug, and he just smelled like straight up beer.
Junior year, that's when I started drinking, so that was a problem. Yeah. Were you ever called on the carpet for that? A couple times. Yeah.
And I mean, he started to get more friends. He got friends because he would like do this thing where he would pretend to like spaz for some reason. And people thought that was funny, so they like started this little group. And one time they paid Jeffrey a couple of dollars to go to the mall and just start spazzing with his friends. They went to go fish somewhere. Jeffrey pulled out a fish. Out of nowhere, he just starts stabbing the fish. And his friends are like, what is wrong with you? Like, why would you do that? And Jeffrey, he said, I just wanted to see how it looked inside. That's when 1978, Jeff graduated. After graduation, his parents, they just tried to fix their marriage. And it didn't work, so they decided to split. Jeffrey's mom won custody for the smallest child, David, and he went with David to one of her family members' houses, and she just like lived there. But Jeffrey's dad left the house, so Jeffrey was just at his house by himself. So one day Jeffrey was driving around and he sees a hitchhiker on the side of the road. He asked this hitchhiker, because he found him very attractive, hey, do you want to go and drink? I got some beers at the house. And the hitchhiker said yeah. They go to Jeffrey's house and they drink and they have fun. And that's when the hitchhiker was like, hey, I gotta go back to my house. And this upset Jeffrey a lot. Jeffrey hits this man with the 10-pound dumbbell and he dies. Jeffrey stated that he did not hit this man just to kill him. He just wanted him to stay with him because he was very lonely. But the next day, Jeffrey gets the body and cuts it all up and then puts it in the back of his house. Digs a hole, puts it in there. Next day, he decided to dig it back up. Cuts it even more, gets the flesh out, and like his father showed him, he dissolved the flesh and kept the bones. He kept some and then he scattered some of it at this wooded area behind his house. And while he was driving there, a cop stops him because he was crossing like the yellow line in the road, like any good cop should. He was flashing his light to see if there's any contraband or anything suspicious. He sees 5 bags and he's like, what are those bags for? Dahmer was like, oh, I was about to throw away this trash. And the cop just lets him go. It's one of the many times Jeffrey Dahmer could have been stopped. And after that, Jeffrey kept on checking the newspaper to see if there was any missing person or any reports. And there wasn't any. And this excited Dahmer because Jeffrey Dahmer killed and he's gay and no one knew about it. Jeffrey's dad checks up on Jeffrey and sees that 1, he's living by himself, and 2, that he's doing nothing productive. So he's like, yo, Jeffrey, go to college. I'll literally pay. So that's what happens. Jeffrey goes to college, but he's not very good at his work. So he gets a 0.45 GPA and he just decides to drop out. So he dropped out. So Jeffrey's father was like, all right, how about the army? Jeffrey goes to the army and he was pretty good. He was actually a combat medic, whatever that means. And he was said to be above average. But the thing was, he would rape other people in the army. So Jeffrey got
discharged.
Enlisted. He had to go somewhere and he chose to go to Florida because he didn't want his father to know that he got discharged. He went there, he drank a lot, he didn't pay his rent, he got evicted, and so he went to go live with his father. Jeffrey was just being a little complicated, so he moved with his grandma. Jeffrey's grandma was actually very loving. She was really the only person that loved Jeffrey, and Jeffrey loved his grandma. He would help her, and he would go to church with her, he would help her with chores, and he actually got a job. In 1985, Jeffrey would start to attend bathhouses, and he was said to drug men and have sexual intercourse with them. But then he got caught for drugging men. He had to resort to hotels, bring men to hotels, and one time he brought one. He woke up and he saw that he was like dead, and he doesn't remember killing him. Like, he was just blacked out drunk. I mean, that's what Jeffrey states. When he accidentally murdered the guy, he decided to put him in a little luggage. This one guy at the hotel tried to help him with the luggage, and he said, this is really heavy, buddy. What do you got in here? A body? And Jeffrey says, yes, and they both laugh. Jeffrey would get most of his victims at gay bars, and he found one that he was attracted to. His name was Eddie Smith. Eddie was an aspiring model. He loved modeling, and Jeffrey just knew the right things to say to him. Jeffrey would pay him $100 for a session to like take his photos. I forgot to mention, but when they were done with their sessions, one day he just killed the guy. And now moving on to like what Jeffrey Dahmer would do to the bodies. When Dahmer would kill his victims, he would keep them for a little so he could touch them, rub on them, kiss them. He just really wanted somebody and just wanted a companionship, because when he tried, it never worked out. Jeffrey would start to get curious, so he started to eat the bicep, the legs, and the heart of his victims, and he liked it so much that that would be the only thing he would eat, human meat. Dahmer would preserve the bodies and would put the bodies in his bag, but then he would need to take a shower, so he would have to take a shower in cold water to preserve what's inside the bag. But he said it was worth it. Jeffrey wanted something more. He wanted somebody that would never leave him, and so he had fantasies of making a sex zombie. So he got a victim, he drugged the victim. When his victim was still alive, he drilled a hole in the victim's skull and it was filled with acid. Just inject the acid inside. The craziest part is that the victim woke up in the middle of him drilling his skull. The victim said something like, "I have a headache." And as you can probably guess, the victim did not survive. His fifth victim, 14-year-old boy, he actually escaped Jeffrey's room, and then he was spotted like with some women, and they looked really concerned. They were like, "Oh my god, are you okay?" He was like, "This is my friend, he's really drunk right now." The ladies didn't believe it because we're ladies, we know. When he got caught with the cops, Jeffrey Dahmer says, "I had to think of a story quickly. I told them he was a friend, he was drunk." And so I guess they like kind of believed him. Something that was a big problem for Jeffrey Dahmer was the smell. There was a lot of odor coming out of his apartment. And it was because he was killing people. Like, it's gonna smell. He would always get calls and complaints. He would always find an excuse. He would say it was his fish tank, and then he would say it was his fridge. It's not on, and the stuff in there is rotting.
So I had to call him and ask him what's going on. Can't he clean up or what?
How did that go? I'd either blame it on the freezer or the fish tank.
He would get away with it. Then Jeffrey finally got caught. 32-year-old Tracy Edward runs from Jeffrey's apartment and tries to follow this police car. And then he had like one handcuff attached to him, and he was asking the police to get it off, but like their keys didn't work. So then he led the police to Jeffrey Dahmer's house. Jeffrey didn't have the key, and the only way he would get the handcuffs off is from cutting the victim's hand, and then that's how he would get it off. And so Jeffrey was like, "Okay, I have it in my house." And like he was trying to like push them away from like his room. He was like, I'll get it. And so they just bust in. They go to his drawer, and they open the drawer. They see so many photos, and they see a photo of him skinning somebody, and then the police realizes he's in that same very room that the photo was taken. So then the police yells at his partner, and he says, "Grab him." One of the cops went to go check the refrigerator, and they see a freshly cut severed head. And then they go to the freezer, and they see individually wrapped human meat. Jeffrey had to do life in jail. It was said that Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 17 young men and boys. And while he was in jail, he would attend church. He actually got baptized. Christopher Scarver, one of the inmates in the same prison Jeffrey was in, killed 2 people. He was schizophrenic also too. But one of those people were Jeffrey Dahmer. You wanna know how he killed him? He killed him with a dumbbell, which is the same thing Jeffrey used on his first victim. Jeffrey died, and he had no defense marks. It was told that he just let it happen. So, what happens to Jeffrey after he died? Many books were published. His mom dies in the year 2000. His dad retired, and he also made a book. And the book was about how it was living with Jeffrey and his life with Jeffrey. And you know, David, his brother, he changed his last name because he just didn't want to be involved. Tracy Edwards, the guy that escaped from Jeffrey Dahmer 2 decades later, was charged with homicide.